Hello students, welcome back to Programming in C language. Myself Sreekanth. We are discussing about program fundamentals. In this session, we'll discuss in detail about programming languages and various generations of programming languages, its uses and examples. See, what is program? What are the various programming languages are there? So we try to discuss one by one. Here, program is nothing but the set of instructions is technically termed as program, and the process of creating program is called programming. A programming language is a computer language used to write instructions for the computer in a well defined format. A computer program is a collection of instructions that can be executed by a computer to perform a specific task. A computer program is usually written by a computer programmer in a programming language, like specific programming language. If you are writing in C, C programming language. If you are writing in C++, then you are writing instructions in the C++ program, like Java, .NET, Python, Perl, PHP. Based on the particular programming language, computer programmer or software engineer or developer or coder is going to be writing set of instructions. That is nothing but what? Program for specific use, for specific application development. For the purpose, we are going to be writing a program. Here, human readable form of source code. Source code always understood what? High level instructions. We are user understandable instructions. That is nothing but what? Source code. A compiler or assemblers or language translators can deliver what? Machine understandable code. Converting what? Source code into machine understandable code. Converted by what? The language translators like compilers, assemblers, and interpreters. Computer programming is the process of writing or editing source code. Editing source code involves what? Testing, analyzing, refining, and sometimes coordinating with other programmers on a jointly developed program. A person who practices the skills is referred to as a computer programmer or software developer, and sometimes we may call coder. Here you need to understand the several programming languages. Generally it categorized by what? Low level languages, middle level languages, and high level languages. But basically categorized two types: low level language and high level languages. Here low level languages again categorized by what? Machine language. Here first generation languages are called machine language. Second generation languages are called assembly language. The high level languages are further divided by two types, like third generation languages like imperative languages, functional languages, declarative languages. The fourth generation language is called object oriented languages, and fifth generation languages are called natural languages or human understandable languages. It makes more user friendly. See, this is about what is program, what is programming language, what are the examples of programming languages on different generations. Okay, we'll discuss in detail about different types of programming languages in coming session. In this session we try to discuss what is program, what is programming language, and generations of programming language. Okay, here what is program? Program is nothing but set of instructions, is technically termed as what? Program. And what is programming? The process of creating a program is called programming. Okay, a programming language is a computer language used to write instructions for the computer in a well defined format. See, why we are writing these instructions based on particular program? We are developing what? Applications. In the previous video session I explained, right? What is application, application softwares, what are the various application softwares using in the real world environment. Okay, so using this program we can writing some set of instructions for developing what? Applications for user related or user required applications for minimizing the work of end users. Okay, see, coming to the generations of programming language. See, If you go through the previous video sessions, I explained in detail about various generations of computers, right? But in this session, we are discussing about various generations of what? Programming languages. Here, the first generation of programming languages are called machine language or binary language. Always it represents in the form of what? Zeros and ones. The secondary generation of programming languages are called assembly language. Here it is called low level language. Assembly language also comes under what? Low level language. So it comes under what? Secondary generation of language. But here we are writing some mnemonics, symbolical representation. The third generation of programming languages are called high level language. Okay, so generally we go with what? Procedural languages all comes under what? High level languages. The fourth generation of programming languages comes under very high level languages like non procedural languages. And fifth generation languages are called natural languages. Okay, examples here I provided, right? Machine level languages, general written zeros and ones. Assembly language like symbolical representations, mnemonics. High level languages are called procedural languages like C language, okay, C++, and so on. And very high level languages like non procedural languages like databases, report generation languages. And fifth generation languages like natural languages like Prolog, Mercury, and so on. So this is about various generations of programming language. Here we try to discuss in detail one by one. Okay. See, coming to the first generation language is called what? Machine language, or also called binary language, is nothing but what? First generation languages. A first generation programming language is a machine level programming language. Okay, see these here machine code is what? Is a computer program written in what? Machine language. It uses the instruction set of particular computer architecture. See, the first generation computer relied on what? Machine language, the lowest level programming language understood by computers to perform what? Various input and output operations. In the machine level language, the set of instruction codes which can be directly understood by the processor or CPU of a computer system without the help of any translating programs. Here there is no any translators are not required. Directly we are giving instructions in the form of low level language that is called machine code or object code. And the programming languages which contains the machine code is called machine language. All informations in the computer is handled using what? Electrical components like the integrated circuits, ICs, okay, integrated circuits, semiconductors, and so on. All of which can recognize only two states: presence or absence of an electrical signal. Two symbols used to represent these two states, 0 and 1, and are known as what? Bits or binary digits. Here 0 represents the absence of a single. 1 represents what? Just a moment, I try to write here. Here it supports only two symbols like 0 and 1. Okay, here 0 represents what? The absence of a single. 1 represents what? The presence of a signal. As computer machine use these two binary digits, zeros and ones. Binary digits are going to be used in what? Machine level language for handling what? Input outputs. So its language is also known as what? Binary language. Machine language differs from machine to machine because the internal design or structure of every computer varies from what? Computer to computer. The programs written in machine language for one computer model will not run on a computer of what? Different model. That's what we can call it is machine dependent language. See, this machine language can be easily used by the computer, but it is difficult to read and understand by the user. Okay. See, these machine languages are understood by only what? Machine, represented by what? Zeros and ones representation. See, this first generation language on machine language, the lowest level program language understand by what? Computer to perform various input output operation. See, here it consists what? Only machine code or object code. The set of instruction codes which can be directly understood by the CPU or processor. Such type of codes are called machine code or object code. It is generally represented by what? Zeros and ones representation. The first generation programming languages is what? Machine level programming language. See, these first generation language is a group of programming languages that are machine level languages used to program first generation computers. Originally, no translators was used in the first generation languages. Not required any translators. Directly we are giving instructions understand by the computer language called machine language only. That is represented by what? Machine code or object code. Generally it represented by what? Zeros and ones representation. See, the instructions in first generation language are made up of what? Binary numbers, zeros and ones. Okay, in the examples, best examples like machine level programming language and hex editor is there. Okay, HEX. This hex editor allows one to edit binary data on a computer. It allows use of opcodes instead of the number of the command. You can able to understand here how we are passing this instruction format. The instruction format is going to be passing in a opcode. Is nothing but what? Operation code. Okay, another called operand. Operand consists what? Address or location information. This opcode part specifies the function of the instruction that is to be performed by the computer. See, remember here, suppose I want to perform here 2 plus 4. Okay, 2 plus 4. Then you cannot give 2 plus 4 directly into the first generation languages. You need to convert 2 in the binary language, 4 in the binary language, plus symbol in the binary language. Generally it is combination of what? Zeros and ones combination. Every opcode represented in the form of what? Binary digits, zeros and ones conversion only. That going to be located for specific address. That address location is called operand. Operand is nothing but what? Address or specific location of the opcode. Okay, see, this is a very difficult interacting with the user. The user is very difficult to interact with this machine level language or binary level language of first generation computers. Okay, see, several advantages and disadvantages. The advantage, the major benefits of machine language is that the program of machine language are translation free. There is no any language translator in the first generation language and can be directly executed by the computer. The programmers written in machine language are executed very speedily and efficiently by the processor of the computer system. But disadvantages like machine language is difficult to read and understand by the user. All operation codes and memory addresses have to be remembered. Your user should remember, because every time cannot convert plus, right? Plus, once he is converted in the binary code, he should remember for next time operations of what? Addition. Like similarly, another symbol, subtraction, multiplication, division, like several opcode need to be remembered by what? End user. Error handling is difficult. When an error occurs in a machine language program, the code is not as easy to fix. Machine dependency is there. See, these are all what? Limitations of what? First generation language. Simply can remember, first generation language understood only machine level programming language. That to be machine code or object code, represented by what? Zeros and ones. It is not user friendly and it is machine dependent. A user must remember about opcodes, several opcodes, and user every time convert that instructions in the form of what? Binary code. See, these are all what? About first generation computers. Okay, to overcome this, they are going to be improved what? Second generation language is called what? Assembly language. See, this assembly language uses what? Symbols, symbolics or mnemonics. Mnemonics is nothing but what? Short code for what? Instruction. Here you no need to give completely in the form of zeros and ones representation. Here we are going to be using some mnemonics are going to be using, like add, okay, like a subtract or multiplication or division. Like we are going to be using some mnemonics. Mnemonics are nothing but what? Short code for instruction. This assembly language was the next higher level of computer programming languages, which we categorized under second generation languages. Assembly languages is easier to understand and use a compared to what machine language, because it used what some mnemonics like performing specific operations like add means what addition, sub means what subtraction. Here a translating program called what assembler. See, in the previous video session we discussed, right? Here translator is required. Which translator is required in the second generation language? Assembler is going to be required. Assembler is a translator, is used to translate the instructions written in what assembly language into what machine language. The program written using mnemonics is called source program. The translated binary form of the source program is called object program. This assembly language is machine dependent. Assembly language program is specific to particular machine, because each instructions in the symbolic language is translated into exactly one machine language instruction. Assembly language statements are written one per line, where each statement contains a mnemonics. Programming in assembly language requires what extensive knowledge of what computer architecture. Okay. Observe, assembly code is converted into what? Executable machine code by utility program referred to an assembler. Assembler is a translator is there in the second generation language. Used in what? Motorola MC6800, like assembly languages like MIPS, NASM like Netwide Assembler, x86 assembly level language. These are all what assembly languages used in second generation languages. See, assembly languages uses what? Mnemonics. Okay. See, mnemonics is nothing but what? The short code for what? Instruction represented by like add, sub, like that. See, each instruction of assembly language contains what? Symbolic operation code and a symbolic address. But in the previous first generation language consists what? Opcode and opcode address information. Okay, here some terminologies already we discussed, right, in the previous video sessions, like high level procedure function declaration and invocations, advanced control structures like if, then, else, switch like conditional and selection statement. Like internally it consists what? Macro assemblers for macro instructions. For these advanced control structures for what? Assembler, high level assemblers, and high level data abstraction data types, including like structures, records, unions, micro assemblers like micro program firmwares, like that. Like sophisticated macro processing, all the available in what? Like 1950s IBM 700 series, IBM 7700 series, 1960s IBM System 360, among other machines. Like object oriented programming features classes, object, abstract, polymorphism, and inheritance. See, these are all what? In the form of what? Assembly languages. Here you need to remember assembly languages. Here we are representing what? Symbolic operation code like mnemonics and symbolic address. That here required what? Assembler. Assembler is a translator required for converting what? Assembly language into what? Machine code. The main advantage for using second generation language, user not required to write completely in machine level language. Okay, in previous language must be write in the form of zeros and ones representation, but here not required to write completely in zeros and ones representation. User is going to be using assembly level language. This assembler is going to be converting, responsible to translating assembly language into what? Machine code or object code. The familiar assembly level languages like MIPS, Netwide Assemblers, x86 assembly language. Okay. See how these syntax are represented by assembly level language, like label, mnemonic, operands, and some comment. Like we are going to be writing the instructions like move, like local AL with what? 97 decimal, 61 hexa, like I increment count, INC count, add AH comma BH, add the content of what? BH register into what? AH registers. Okay, like add is a mnemonic, opcode for what? Addition. Sub is a mnemonic opcode for what? Subtraction. Load is mnemonic opcode for what? Load. Store is mnemonic opcode for what? Storing. Load B loads the content of B into what? Accumulator. Add C adds the content of C to what? Accumulator. Store D stores the results content of accumulator into what? Storage location D. See here, using assembly level language, not required to write completely in machine level language like zeros and ones, but here we are using what? Assembly language represented in the form of what? Symbolic representation like mnemonics. These mnemonic represent what? Short code for what? Instructions. Okay, but still it is assembly language is what? Low level language, machine dependent language. Okay, some advantages like assembly language is easier to understand and use as compared to what? Machine language. One of the main benefit of assembly language is that programmers need not to keep track of the storage location of the data and instructions while writing an assembly language program. As compared to machine language, the programs written in assembly language are less errors. Okay, some disadvantages like assembler is required to translate the instructions written in assembly level language to what? Machine language or machine understandable language. Here assembly level language is still machine dependency, because an assembly language program is also specific to a what? Particular machine. Okay, so this is about second generation languages are called assembly languages. Here one language translator is required, that is assembler, converting assembly language into what? Machine code, machine understandable language. Okay, next we are entering into what? Third generation language called high level language. The third generation language was the next improvement in the field of what? Computer programming languages. It refers to what? High level programming languages like Fortran, COBOL, Basic, Pascal, C, C++, and Java. See, it enables what? Programmers to develop software applications. High level languages use a syntax. Here high level languages uses what? Syntax. Syntax is nothing but what? Language rule. Every programming language consists its own syntax, means its own language rule, that is very easy to understand, but the syntax of each high level language is different from the other high level language. Like C has its own C syntax language rule, C++ has its own C++ language rule, C sharp like Java has its own syntax and language rule, but must be programmer must be follow that syntax and language rule for developing what? Particular programming applications. Okay, see these, the programs written in high level languages are shorter in length as compared to that of what? Low level languages like assembly and machine level language. Here translators like what? Compilers and interpreters. In the third generation language we are using which language translators? Compilers and interpreters are used to translate the programs written in what? High level language into what? Machine language. High level languages are machine independent. High level languages are what? Machine independent. The programs written in high level languages for one computer will run on a computer of what? Different model. High level languages are easy to learn. High level languages use common English words as their keywords based on ASCII standards and Unicode standards. It is easier to modify and maintain programs written in what? High level languages. See, these are all the major points of what? Third generation language. See, a third generation language is a high level computer programming language that tends to be more machine independent. Very important point. But first generation, second generation languages are what? Machine dependent. But third generation language is what? Machine independent and programmers friendly. Their first second generations are not programmer friendly, but third generations are what? Programmer friendly. Then machine code of the first generation and assembly languages. The best examples of common and historical third generation programming languages like Algol, Basic, C language, COBOL language, Fortran, Java, and Pascal. See, these are all suitable for what? Third generation languages. High level languages are machine independent. The programs written in high level languages for one computer will run on a computer of what? Different model. First introduced in what? 1950s like Fortran, Algol, and COBOLs are examples of what? Early third generation languages. Most popular general purpose languages like nowadays C, C++, C Sharp, Java, Basic, and Pascal are also what? Third generation languages. So each of these languages can be further subdivided into what? Other categories based on other contemporary traits. Most third generation languages supports structured programming. Many supports what? Object oriented programming. Third generation language supports what? Structural oriented programming language, procedural oriented programming language, and object oriented programming languages. Okay, generally remember, third generation languages are called procedural oriented programming language. We may also call POPL, procedural oriented programming language. It consists what? Structural oriented programming languages like a C language, object oriented programming languages like C++, C Sharp, Java, and so on. These third generation language being what? Algorithmic or procedural language. Okay, most third generation languages are what? Structural programming and object oriented programming. Both are what? Procedural oriented programming languages. Best examples like C, C++, C Sharp, Java, Basic, Pascal, Fortran, Algol, Cobol, all are what? Third generation programming languages. But in this session we are learning which language? C language. Now we can give the definition. What is a C language? C is a third generation programming language. C is a middle level language, because third is what? Middle level language. C is what? Procedural oriented programming language. C is what? Structural oriented programming language. Now you may give these many definitions about what a C. Okay, C is what? C is a third generation language, procedural oriented programming language. C is a structural oriented programming language. Okay, and C must maintains what? Syntax, because this is a procedural language. Procedural language consists what? Syntaxes. Syntax means what? Language rule. We must follow some language rule, otherwise immediately throws errors. Who will take care here? Error. Language translator are there, right? Compilers and interpreters are there. This compiler is responsible for checking the syntax and the language rule of the particular programming language. If you are violated any rules and regulations of particular programming language, compiler is going to be throws compile time errors like syntax and semantics errors. Okay, what are the advantages for third generation languages? Like, as compared to machine language and assembly language, high level language is what? Very easy to understand and use. High level languages are what? User friendly compared to what? First and second generation languages, because here we giving instructions in the form of what? English vocabulary and well known symbols. The program written in high level languages can be developed in very less time. Okay, to maintain. Okay, machine independent, very important point. Third generation language is what? Machine independent. The programs written in high level languages for one computer will execute on all other computers without any design issues. Some disadvantages and limitations. A translator here who like a compiler or interpreters or translators is required to translate the instructions written in what? High level language into what? Machine language. High level language programs are comparatively what? Slower than what? Machine or assembly level languages. As compared to machine or assembly languages programs, high level language programs are what? Generally what? Less memory efficient. So these are all what? Some advantages and limitations of what? Third generation languages. But remember, we are learning C language. C is what? Third generation language. C is a structural programming language, procedural oriented programming language. C is a middle level language. C is what? Machine independent language. These points you need to remember about C language. Okay. Next, fourth generation language is called very high level language or non-procedural language. Non-procedural language is called what? Fourth generation languages. Okay. These fourth generation languages are what? Easiest programming languages available today. They are very easy to learn because their syntax and grammars is very easy to learn, because third generation language is what? Case sensitive, like small case, uppercase as a sensitive, but the fourth generation language is what? Non-procedural, case insensitive. Some languages we may give uppercase, lowercase, no issue. These programming in these languages does not require any programming experience in other languages. Fourth generation languages are what? Machine independent. Fourth generation languages are also known as non-procedural languages, because here the importance is laid on what is to be done rather than how it is to be done. Fourth generation languages are what? Programming languages, closer to what? Human languages than typically high level programming languages. Most fourth generation languages are used to access what? Databases. In the morning session explained in detail, right? Database management system, databases. Best examples like SQL. See, these fourth generation languages are what? Machine independent. Okay, fourth generation languages tend to be specified towards very specific programming domains. These fourth generation languages may include what? Support for what? Database management, okay, report generations, mathematical optimization, GUI development, web development. This is normally what? VLSI, very large scale integrations used in fourth generation languages. Each of the programming language generations aims to provide a higher level abstraction. Okay, these four generations may include what? Support of database management system. Okay, fourth generation identifies what? Non-procedural or program generating languages, like different types like table driven programming, runtime frameworks and libraries. Examples like Power Builder. Report generator programming languages like RPG, case tools, data management like SAS, SPSS, and this is about statistical analysis. Okay, statistical analysis and reporting. Extract languages like Supercard, Toolbook, and Live Code. Oracle corporations like Oracle designers, Oracle developer suites. These are all comes under what? Fourth generation languages are called non-procedural languages. Okay, examples like SQL, Unix shell, Oracle reports, R programming, etc. See some advantages, like as compared to the earlier generation programmers, programs written in fourth generation languages are very easy to learn because of the simple syntax and grammar. The programs developed in fourth generation languages are what? Highly portable as compared to what? The programs developed in the languages of earlier generations. Programming productivity is increased in fourth generation code. Okay, programs maintenance is easier. End users can often develop their own applications. Some limitations, like the programmers developed in the fourth generation languages are executed at a slower speed as compared to what? Earlier generations. The programs developed in fourth generations need more space in the memory of the computer system. This is the limitation. Simply remember, machine independent, that to be non-procedural languages we can develop here, especially what? Databases. Okay, like database management, statistical analysis and reporting. These kind of languages or programming languages are developed. Simply we can call non-procedural languages. Okay, next, last generations like fifth generation languages, simply we can call artificial intelligence. Okay, these fifth generation programming languages are designed for to make the computer solve a given problem without the programmer. Up to fourth generation languages required what? Programmer. But coming to fifth generation languages, not required any programmer here. The fifth generation programming languages is also known as natural language. It incorporates the concepts of expert systems, artificial intelligence, and natural language processing. These fifth generation programming languages based on solving problems using constraints given to the program rather than using an algorithm written by a programmer. Best examples like a Prolog, Mercury are the best fifth generation programming languages, like OPS5. These are all what? Fifth generation languages. See, what are the advantages? One of the major advantage of fifth generation programming language is the use of system automation, which reduces the workload on the programmer. Fifth generation languages, user can communicate with the computer system in a simple and easy manner. Fifth generation languages can be used to query the database in a fast and efficient manner. Some limitations, programs continue to get more complicated and slowly lose some relation with the original algorithms. Sophisticated and complex programming tools are used in what? Fifth generation languages. Okay, so these fifth generation languages are used for what? Artificial intelligence and artificial neural network. Generally we may call it is natural language, human understandable languages. user interface is going to be increases in the fifth generation languages. So this is about various generations of languages we discussed in this session. Like first generation languages called machine languages. This is what machine independent. All each and every instructions must be written in what binary language, represented by what binary code, zeros and ones format. Here programmer is very difficult to interact with these language because each and every instructions must be converted into what binary code, like op code. Here several op codes need to remember by the user, op code and operands information, easy to execute those instructions, but very difficult to remember op code, operand instructions, and very difficult to convert all the high level instructions into what machine understandable instruction by the programmer itself. Okay, so this is a problem. And machine dependent, first generation languages are machine dependent, second generation languages also machine dependent, but here improved comparing to first generation. We are used what assembly language. Okay, assembly language, here assembler is responsible. Assembler is the language translator, converts assembly level language into what machine understandable language. Assembly languages uses what symbolical operation coded and a symbolical address. The familiar assembly languages like MIPS, netwide assemblers like NASM, x86 assembly language. This second generation language is what architectural dependent, particular operating system architecture dependent, also called machine dependent. Okay, so this is a representation of mnemonics: add, sub, load, store, and so on. Okay, high level languages like third generation languages. These third generation languages are what machine independent. These are all what procedural oriented programming languages. Here each language consists of like language rule and syntax. That syntax we must follow to develop these applications. Otherwise, compiler is the language translator. Here it going to be generate what compile time errors. If you are not following any rules and regulations, immediately it throws compile time errors. Here we are learning in this tutorial what C language, right? C is what third generation language. C is what procedural oriented programming language. C is what structural programming language. C also consists of a set of rules and regulations to develop the C applications called C syntaxes. Okay, several languages are there, not only C, like C++, C Sharp, Java, Basic, Pascal, Fortran, Algol, Cobol. These are all what high level languages like object. Some languages like object oriented programming languages are there. Okay, don't worry, we'll discuss what is object oriented everything in the next coming sessions. Next here, fourth generation languages are called non-procedural. Third generations have some strict rules and regulations. Their upper cases, lower cases, like if you are written what capital letters like A and a small a has some differences because it is case insensitive. Case sensitive. Third generation languages must have case sensitive. Okay, capital A, capital B is different, small a, small b different, because both having what different in the third generation languages, case sensitive in nature. But coming to fourth generation languages, this is non-procedural languages, case insensitive languages. Okay, you go with the VLS, like very large scale integration, specially used for what statistical analysis and reporting, like table driven programmings. Okay, especially what database related, those is going to be improved in what fourth generation languages. And last generation language is called fifth generation language is called artificial intelligence or natural languages for developing what artificial intelligence and artificial neural network. Examples like OPS5, Mercury, Prolog. Okay, so this is about various generations of programming languages we discussed in detail in this session, like first generation languages like machine language or binary language. Second generation languages like assembly language. Here assembler is a language translator. Assembly languages uses what mnemonics. Third generation languages like high level languages, like a completely procedural oriented programming language. Every language consists its own syntax and semantics. Here compilers and interpreters are what language translators. Here we programmer must follow some rules and regulations. If you are violated that rules and regulations, compiler and interpreters are going to be generate errors. You must fix that error, then only you may get outputs of the particular programming language. Especially what? C language. C is what? Structural oriented programming language. C is a procedural oriented programming language. C is what? High level language. C is a middle level language. Like that. Fourth generation languages are what? High level programming languages. Very high level programming languages called non-procedural oriented programming languages, specially developed for databases. Fifth generation languages are called what? Artificial intelligence, or also called natural languages, especially for artificial intelligence. Okay, that's it for this session. We discussed in detail about various generations of computers. Okay, thank you for watching my videos. Thank you all.